How do you spell your name, man? W-E-S? Oh.
What do you guys tell me about power steering? What do you know about power steering? Huh?
I need it on my
How many of you have ever driven a car that didn't have power steering?
I know he has.
Did you notice that? Did you notice that even when a car doesn't have power steering, it's really not that hard to steer? A car that does have power steering and the power steering doesn't work is really hard to steer. But the one that does not have power steering is pretty easy to turn the wheel anyway. So what do they do to make it easier to steer?
What, the power steering?
Yeah.
Oh,
Anybody got any idea? They changed the alignment angles. Think about it. Yeah, if you've got if your caster is more back this way instead of back that way, it's going to be easier to steer. Then if you turn it this way, when you turn the wheel, if the caster is out this way, it's going to be raising the car up. It's still out that way a little bit, but you're going to change that caster angle, and it's going to be easier to steer. It's just the way that is. All right, now. Yeah, but you can actually change the caster angle, and it'll make it easier to steer. So now, if you got one of them crazy Nissan 240SX, it may not even have an adjustment on that. I don't even remember. Yeah, it does. But so that's how you can change that. But one way or another, power steering. The first car that I ever remember seeing power steering on personally, and I don't know when they first came out with it. I could have researched it on something, whatever. But the first car I ever remember seeing power steering when I opened the hood was under a 60 model Ford. And it had power steering on it. It used a hydraulic pump, and it gives you steering assist and all that. There was a 2008 Equinox in here the other 2 or 3 semesters ago when we were doing steering and suspension. I guess it was the last time I taught it. And this girl was in cosmetology, and she was driving it. And when she pulled in here, I says, "You guys check the power steering and see it, check the power steering." And it had electric power steering on it. They couldn't find a power steering pump. Well, how do you know if it's got electric? Sometimes the power steering is way down behind the motor, and you can't hardly, you can't just see it on a lot of cars. I look for the pulleys, because the biggest pulley usually is the power steering pump pulley. Now, why does that pulley need to be so big?
Because it generates a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, you're basically not wanting to spin it so terribly fast, but you are wanting it to have some power. So if you're wanting to have some power, the bigger the pulley, the more power you got. You can just about turn anything if you got a pulley 10 feet in diameter, you know what I'm saying? But the bigger the pulley goes, the more power you got. The smaller the pulley goes, the faster it's going to spin. That's like your little alternator pulley.
Well, you wouldn't have more power, right?
Huh?
So the smaller you have less power.
You slip the belt, probably. See what I'm saying? You don't want to slip the belt. You want a lot of traction for that belt and all that. So anyway, first question. Once the center mounting nut is removed from a steering wheel, the wheel should easily slip off the shaft.
Oh, yeah, you're going to have to bow, you're going to go up on it.
Most of the time, you can pull it off if you rock it and pull it and rock it and pull it, but you make sure you got all your wires unplugged because you don't want to rip the cruise control buttons apart. But anyway, the connector plugging into them, but we typically take, if you take a little 2-jaw puller on the ones that are set up or a little steering wheel puller, you can bring them on off of there. And
that's false, right?
That is false. Everybody in here is pulling a steering wheel and doing doggone well. It's not going to just slip off the shaft real easy. Even the ones that used to have splines on them from years ago, the splines were kind of tapered like a pitman arm, and they were a bear to get off of there. The 2 main types of steering gear racks, the 2 main types of steering gear systems are rack and pinion and worm and roller. False.
Oh, that was worm and roller. I thought that was the other one.
Well, is that the right name for it? What'd you see? What'd you see in your book there, Lawrence? The research man. They're not going to call it that.
I know it's rack and pinion. I don't know the other one.
The name is all fouled up, worm and roller. What's up with that?
It's the same thing?
The 2 main types for steering gear systems. What do you call that? While he's looking that up, we're going to move on to number 3. Most passenger vehicles have rack and pinion steering.
What's a passenger vehicle?
Most passenger vehicles have rack and pinion steering. Yes or no?
Yes.
What vehicles do we have out here that don't have rack and pinion steering on?
Bronco.
Bronco don't? What else?
Ranger don't?
that 98 Crown Victoria police car don't.
It don't?
Nope. It's got plain old
Pinion arm?
Pitman arm, parallelogram steering.
I don't know, that's what the answer is.
Huh?
That's what the answer is, he just gave it away.
Yeah. Actually, the worm and roller is just a bad, we actually did a worksheet yesterday that you missed out on. It was extremely important because these guys right here all understand the way that the other kind of steering works. So we partially disassembled it, showed you how it worked, showed you how to adjust it where it wouldn't have play and all that,
I don't understand.
These guys blew through a lot of worksheets yesterday. All right. So most passenger vehicles do have rack and pinion steering. Even pickup trucks nowadays have got rack and pinions. Now, an exception, your big heavy-duty vehicles like that van out there that he just brought over here, he said the van's running bad and it may need the wheels balanced on it. And it's a big old 15-passenger van. But one way or another, it's got a big rack. I mean, it's got the big steering gear on it, Ford steering gear. Recirculating ball is what you were thinking about when you were thinking about worm and roller. Recirculating ball is the rack.
That's what moves it back and forth, right?
Yeah, it's got basically the steering column has got some oddball threads on it that are made for balls to run in, and this ball nut has actually got some balls that go around and around, and you get, I can show you how to take that thing apart. I used to have everybody to take one of those apart and put it back together, but we had some crybabies that didn't like having to fool with that because it's a real job, and really there's so few of them around anymore. You just buy a replacement, like for this van. When it finally wore out and was having too much play and they didn't like the way it was driving, we went ahead and you couldn't adjust it out. We just, for $225, I bought a rebuilt power steering gear from Ford. See, so that worked out. All right. So number 4 is false.
It's false? Has less false?
Recirculating ball steering system. Well, how many balls you think's in there? If you counted all those balls, that's a heck of a lot of moving parts, right?
A lot of balls.
And they don't weigh less. I mean, how many of you guys held that steering, you can hold a steering rack in one hand like this, but you got to be a stud like me to hold that one piece of that other, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, if you got to be able, you can curl that thing, it's pretty stiff. And the one for that truck, I mean, that thing probably weighs 60 pounds, So a steering rack is aluminum and you can just throw it around all over the place. Less linkage. They're less parts to wear out. I mean, it's just a whole lot better system, really.
What?
Yeah.
Figured out how big the stub Brandon was.
Yeah. All right. Pressure generated by a power steering pump may reach 2,000 psi.
And that's true.
That is true. It puts out a heck of a lot of pressure. In most cases, an electric motor drives the power steering pump.
False.
That's absolutely false. In some cases, but not in most cases.
Well, everything's going to that.
Yeah, that's eventually where we're all headed. Front wheel alignment is necessary after any front end steering component replacement.
True.
You always need to check the alignment, guys. That's just part of it, okay? You always, yeah, checking the alignment's pretty important, regardless. Number 8. All of the following are major components of a steering system except the A steering shaft, B steering gear, C steering valve, or D steering arms.
I never heard of steering valve.
Well, steering valve is the right answer as far as what's not there. So it's not really a part
What's
of
the
it.
steering valve then?
Well, the steering valve, if you wanted to try to act like there was a steering valve, that would be the valve that's connected to the drive shaft that directs the fluid to.
Oh, okay.
But that's not really, that's a spool valve. It's the difference really of the wrong name. Now, a lot of stuff is semantics. The housing that contains and supports the steering shaft is called what? A steering housing, B steering arm, C steering column, or D steering coupler. The housing
The
that
coupler's what's the
the coupler's down at the bottom where it connects to the
steering shaft?
steering shaft. I mean, no, the steering.
The actual steering.
The steering gear, steering column connects to the steering gear with a coupler that will either be like a little U-joint. I used to put a kind of a thick piece of canvas and rubber, so that it was you'd had 2 T's that were hooked together, and it would actually create a sort of of a flexible joint.
I don't know. I'm not say steering now.
That's called the steering column, by the way, in case anybody asks you about it.
This ain't the steering column? I thought the steering column was where...
The steering column is the tube that it goes down through, basically. See what I'm saying?
Okay.
All right. Number 10. Tie rod ends connect to what? A, ball sockets, B, pitman arms, C, idler arms, or D, the steering gear?
On which end, though?
Good question. Well, wait a minute. You only got 4 choices and only one of them's right. I understand your question, but you got to eliminate any answer as you come to it. Do tie rod ends connect to ball sockets? Do they or don't they?
No. Because
What is a ball socket?
I guess they're talking about where the like it bolts to the lower control arm. That ball joint? Is that what it's talking about? Because everything I ever took it off of doesn't have something like that. Ball what?
I think it's a kind of a poorly worded question. According to the answer key, that's supposed to be the right answer. A.
What's a ball socket?
That's what's on. You know how the tie rod end has got a little ball socket on the end of it. You know, that's what they're talking about.
That's not. I figured every minute.
Over there, you know that little thing I got sticking out with those wires on. That's a inner tie rod end, and there's a ball socket on both ends of that darn thing.
Both ends?
Yeah, there's a ball socket where it screws into the rack, and there's another ball socket on the end out there. See?
I need to look at some pictures of that.
Yeah.
I figured it would have been the steering gear.
You know how you got the little boot and the race fitting?
Yeah.
What's up in there? You got a socket and you got a ball.
Oh, okay.
Now some of the, I remember Ford for a while used some rubber ones that had a tendency to help the steering return to the center. And if you had the wheels turned all the way to the right when you bolted those suckers up, if you turn the wheel straight, it'd try to turn back to the right. You know, because it was basically using the memory in that rubber. I thought it was kind of a silly way to design something with a ball socket been working so well for so long. But that's what, I really like the way that question's written, but I didn't write it. And usually if I miss a question on an ASE test, it'll be because it was a poorly written question.
Yeah.
At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The number of degrees that a steering wheel must turn in order to turn the road wheels 1 degree is called the what? A, steering angle, B, steering ratio, C, angle of input, or D, angle ratio.
Steering angle?
The number of degrees the steering wheel must turn in order to turn the road wheels 1 degree.
Angle ratio?
That's the steering ratio. The steering ratio. All of the following are components of a hydraulic power steering system except A, master cylinder. We know that's the right answer.
Yeah.
It's not part of the power steering. The other 3 would be pump, reservoir, and drive belt. Let me tell you a little something real quick about a lot of these power steering systems now, a lot of them. You know, for years the pump and the reservoir were together, right? You see that tagged shirt and everything?
And I'm going to go through them and look at them ones.
Yeah, that was bad. It came back not fixed. That was after the fire, though, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, put the whole green on both of them on the desk in here, if you don't mind. And we probably had plenty of rags to deliver, didn't we? Right. I mean, plenty of rags in our empty, did you bring?
I didn't pick them up, I just threw 75 out there, but I'll pick them up.
I think it's filling up, you better do something.
I'll take care of it.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
All right. You couldn't hardly operate without a rag person bringing rags and stuff in there, could you? All right, let me tell you about this. The reservoir, what would you tell somebody? The pump will be mounted over here, spun by the belt, and it's a little device back in here, and it's got a remotely mounted reservoir that's up there where it's real easy to get to, and it's got a great big old hose going down here to the pump. Then typically there'll be a return line, you know, or whatever. But somebody has got this thing full of fluid. They got a little cap up here, they got it full of fluid, but they still don't have any power steering. And it's the power steering pump just whining to beat the band, but this is full of fluid. So what do you think wrong with that?
Stopped up.
Where?
And then line return on?
No. Right in here, there's a screen. A lot of people don't even know it's there. And if you won't. I mean, and what happens is the way you find that is you take vacuum attachment or whatever you want to, or take this reservoir off, and you pour the fluid out of it into a pan, and you look down in there with a flashlight, and you'll see a screen, and that little sucker will be clogged up. It ain't hard to fix this, y'all.
All of them have that.
The ones with the remote-mounted reservoir do. I don't know of one that doesn't have a screen in that reservoir. And it's basically
remote.
Well, instead of having, most of the ones that you see that you're used to seeing on the older cars, the power steering pump and the reservoir are all one unit.
Okay.
The fill cap will be right here.
Mm-hmm.
This one here has got a hose feeding power steering fluid to the pump. It's spun by the belt, but the reservoir is way off over here with hoses going on.
Okay.
And that's the one that'll have that clogged up screen. You don't typically have issues like that with this one. You will. And I've seen them. I mean, we've actually had them over here. Hey, we're full of fluid. We ain't no fluid. Pour it out, and you'll see all kind of crud down in there. Now,
How does it get stuff in there?
I guess it just gathers in there from coming out of the power steering system through the return, and there's a little bit of moisture, and there's other things, condensation, all this, whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the inside of the rubber hose is giving way, giving up a little bit of rubber every now and then, just all kinds of junk. And of course, and sometimes you don't know what they've been pouring in there for fluid either. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times, sometimes people don't point. And I tell you something else too, and a lot of folks don't realize it. While there's not anything in most of your books, your maintenance guides about flushing power steering systems, there are procedures in some of your manufacturer shop manuals for flushing power steering. I used to think that was a bunch of hooey, but you can go to the GM shop manual, you can find a procedure for flushing power steering. You know how you do it? Huh? There's a return line. Like on these right here, you got coming out of the, you got two, you got a return line and you got a pressure line, right? Okay, so you're going to take your, let's say you got your return line, it's coming, so it's a hose with a clamp usually. The other one is an old, like a, got to have a line wrench to make it loose.
Just like a...
And you leave that one hooked up, all right? But you cap off this return line because the fluid's supposed to be coming back in here, and you take your return hose that was going there, and you put that going into a bucket down there. And then you turn, some yo-yo turns the wheels back and forth while you're watching this, and you keep adding clean fluid. And you add clean fluid here until nothing but clean fluid's coming out there, and you got nice clean power steering fluids there. Doesn't take a long time to do that. In most cases, it's not that hard to do. Just take your return line loose from here, put a little cap of some kind on there so it don't make a mess, and then you can, let all the return go right past there. That's how you do that.
You know what? Mine might be stopped up because it's fluid in it, but it's still kind of whining. Yeah, just a little bit.
Something else you got to do, and I've talked about these belts before. Don't let the belt come fool you into thinking the power steering pump's bad if it's noisy, or these idlers for your belts. Whenever you got a whining noise coming from your front end accessory drive system, that's what Ford calls your belt, FEAD. But if you got whining noise coming from that area, take the belt off first and crank it without that, see if it still whines. If it doesn't, then you're going to spin all the pulleys by hand and check them for slop. And a lot of times when you spin one of them, you'll hear it go, make a racket. So not that hard to do, okay? All right. Rub that off. All right. Let's keep going here. Before performing a power steering pressure test, you must do all of the following except, there's 13, inspect all hoses, tubes, and fittings. Should you do that?
I sure would.
Run the vehicle so the fluid becomes hot. Replace soft, brittle, or cracked hoses. Replace rusted, dented, or cracked tubing.
I'm going to go with B on that.
B is going to be the one there. You don't necessarily have to run it till it's hot. And there's actually, for an ASC study thing, it came from Snap-on. There's a neat little videotape I can show you about doing power steering pressure tests.
Yeah.
I've never worked at a shop that has ever done a power steering pressure test.
They don't know how?
It's they just, if you got a problem with power steering, you just throw a pump at it anyway, or a steering gear. This is if you're really wanting to be a stickler and get right down to the nitty gritty. You know what I mean? We've got a gauge in there under my desk or somewhere that I've got for checking brake pressure.
Oh man.
Where you hook this gauge up between to your master cylinder, and you mash the pedal and see what the numbers go to. It'll go 2,000 pounds or something. It's real high. All right, so I've also got something in here and we've used it here. You know, I used to have a little worksheet we did on it. But you know, what's the point? Nobody does that in a shop. You know, nobody's gonna hook a gauge. But I do have something that some shops do use, and my buddy's got one at his shop. But I had him before he did. Either that or I got him after he did. I can't remember. Me and him both have them. And these little things you put in between you push the brake pad back away from the rotor, and you put these things in between the rotor and the brake pad, and it's got gauges on them, you know, with needles. And you put one on both sides of the car, and you mash the brakes, and you watch and see if one of them's getting more pressure than the other. That's why your brakes are pulling. Could be something in your ABS unit. Could be a hose stopped up. You can watch how those needles do and tell. See, but I'm getting off on brakes, and here we are steering and suspension, and I do apologize for that. But anyway, I got those. Those I can see, because sometimes if the brakes are pulling and you ain't got no wore out steering parts or anything, you need to know, is this brake pressure different on the right side than the left? They know you're not going to stick your finger in there and tell. You know what I'm saying? All right. So you got to put this gauge in there, and it's nice and safe. You can just watch the gauge. All it's doing is like a little scale, a little pressure transducer thing. And when it squeezes at it, that needle goes up. It's designed to take all that pressure. That's all that set of gauges is for. I can show them to y'all. Yes. Now what I ought to do is put a worksheet together on that. Hey, I can add to the. I've already got so many worksheets on brakes that I probably don't need to add anymore. But I can probably add 3 or 4, 5, or 6 more.
Man, I need like 10 more worksheets.
Yeah, you need to.
I need 10.
All right. So for people, there's over 300 worksheets as people do while they're here if they do like they're supposed to. When performing a power steering pressure test, a pressure gauge should be installed where? Where do you put the pressure gauge, guys, if you're going to perform a power steering pressure test? Is it going to be A, on the high pressure tube at the steering gear, B, on the low pressure tube at the steering gear, which is your return, or C, both A and B, or D, both neither A nor B?
Hold on.
You're checking power steering pressure.
I mean, I take the top off.
Where did that come from? You going to screw the cap off and check the pressure there?
I say the high steering line, because that's where most of the pressure comes from.
High pressure tube, exactly, high pressure tube.
But I mean, well, like
Number A, that's A, it's only 14 to A.
Still work.
Huh?
How you still, that's what you want to say?
Exactly, you gotta have it where pressure's gonna be.
But I mean, how you gonna take the line off?
Yeah, you're gonna take the line off and it's made to go in there. And then there's a little valve and all. I can show you the video, and it's pretty cool. I mean, like I say, nobody ever does it. I mean, and all the, and I'm sure there's shops somewhere that I don't know about that does it. And I've worked at quite a few places. I've never seen anybody do that, really. And this, when we measure the in play on torque converters like this worksheet we got, that one, I've never seen any transmission shop do that. I'm not going to say there's none of them do, but I've never worked anyone that did that. I've worked with a lot of transmission guys, and I've done transmissions, but I've never done that. We just throw a torque converter at it anyway if we feel like there's a problem with that one. Where airbags are concerned, you always do what? A, place undeployed airbags face down on the work table. B, carry undeployed airbags with the face pointing towards your body. C, store in a cool, dry location. Or D, wear short-sleeved clothing when working with airbags.
I say 8.
Okay, so.
No, you don't want to face down because the deploys will shoot up in your face, and you want to face up.
This steering wheel has an undeployed airbag in it. Right? Yeah, the guy I don't know how true this was, but I went to a school one time, Chrysler School, I think it was, and they said that these guys that were working at the OEM manufacturer division things were checking out these airbags. And so they lay these airbags like this. And they had just an airbag on the steering wheel, laid it here like this, and they ran some wires to it, and they lit it off. Now, I think this sounds like a bunch of hooey, but they said when they did it, it went 5,000 feet in the air.
Oh.
I don't think that's so. They got the steering column and put on it and lit it off, and it went like 7 stories, which was like 70 feet or something like that. I can kind of believe that more than I can 5,000 feet. That's kind of dumb. I think the guy at the school was saying that to try to scare the crap out of you. But I have known of people working on airbags, like the guy I told you that took out his lock cylinder and, you know, shorted one of these wires, and when the module sent some juice up there to see if the airbag had a continuous loop, the juice came up here, went back down and found ground where he pinched a wire. He turns on the wire, and it's like somebody hit him with a boxing glove. Boom! Blows out his face. He got a big raspberry on his face and all that. Now, I knew of one guy, was one mechanic that was working on one, didn't unhook the battery before he was fooling with it. And somehow that damn thing lit off, and it picked him up, put him over in the back seat with his feet sticking up there. Philip Kirkland told me a story, this is a digression for sure, about this guy that was working on a van. And he had this, it was a little old van that he was having to kind of lay up on in front of it to work on it. And the engine was running, and he was having to reach over here and do something. He had a drop light there, and then he had, you know, it had a hood prop that would prop the hood up. And I don't even know what kind of vehicle it was. But he says that about the time he looked over, that guy, it was back when drop lights had regular bulbs in them, he burned himself on the drop light. Ow! And he jerked his hand back. And when he jerked his hand back, he knocked the hood prop out from under there with his elbow. And then the hood fell. And here he was with his feet sticking out from under the hood and the engine running, going, oh! Help, help. He says, when I saw that from where I was standing, it looked really serious. Like he was getting eaten alive by this thing. But we got him out of there. And you know, when I found out it didn't hurt him, he said he laughed so hard his stomach hurt for the rest of the day, you know. But anyway, that might have been something to get you on YouTube video, wouldn't it? But look at this steering wheel here, though. We're talking about steering and suspension. How do I get this steering wheel off of here? Do you see a place where you got the, you see a place where you can take the, it's got a bolt, you know, that holds it on there. But can you pop this cover off any kind of way? That's all one piece, guy. What do you do with that? That's all one piece, right there. It's all one piece. I mean, but you
hold it up when you're not there.
Hey, look, part up underneath the bottom right there.
Look at that. Ooh. So what do? See right up under the bottom there, there's a little screw right here. And it's going to be really hard to see without a flashlight. Right in there, there's a little screw right where I'm pointing my finger. And I don't know if you can see it or not, like that. But anyway, that screw that's in there, you're actually going to take your little 5/16, and when you turn that screw, it's got a little worm gear that turns the big screw, and the big screw unscrews out of the steering column and pulls the wheel off. Is that cool as all get out?
Yeah, that's pretty cool for real.
Hey, you're going to love the quality Ford. Quality's job one. Okay. But this is actually an undeployed airbag.
Let's go set it on.
Now, Donnie was in the, we got some airbags we'll set off eventually. When everybody is gone that has already seen an airbag set off, we'll light off a new one. But, Donnie was in the parts room one day. And he was, and there was another guy. There was another guy that was in there. See, airbags are like plastic explosive, right? Because plastic explosive is notoriously stable. You can play with it like Play-Doh, you know. But if you light it off with a detonator, you know, it takes down the whole building. This kind of stuff. Airbags are like that. I'm not going to say that you need to be cavalier with airbags. If there's any power anywhere around this son of a gun on the car, always take the battery like cable loose when you're fooling with airbags, and take that seriously. And anytime somebody doesn't do that, you're taking your life in your hands, because this thing can blow your head clean off. You know what I mean? All right, but anyway, so that's pretty well.
So you need to keep the airbag facing